Alright everybody, what's going on? Time for day 3 of Swanson fly tying here. Today I wanted to do a quick tutorial. I had a concept fly that I really like the thought of. If you follow me on Instagram, I've already shared a pic. Not sure exactly what I want to call it yet. I'm thinking maybe the Casper. We'll find out. In any case, let's get started. So what we're going to do, you'll notice a trend here. Still tying on Arex hooks, Trout Predator number 4s. So in the first vid, my Clouser Minnow video, I talked about, trying to decide where this channel is going to go. And one of the things I realized, right, I'm by no means like an elite tyer or a professional or anything really of that nature, but what I do have some insight on is kind of tying on a budget, right? Hence the black GSP. I realized yesterday that I'm running pretty low on white GSP, so even though this is going to be an all-white fly, we're going to tie with black GSP because that's what I have. So where I was going with this is that this channel, what may end up happening is this may kind of blend into a product review channel along with fly tying, right? Today I think we're gonna try our hand at that for the first time. I'll be talking to you guys about spawn fly heads, my opinion of them. So yeah, let's get started. We're coming in with our Trout Predators and black GSP, and we're gonna start off with a bucktail tail. Excuse me, I got something in my throat. My voice is sounding all weird today. I hope you'll stick with me though. So, taking our bucktail, cleaning it up. We don't need too much since this fly is really simple. Right, it's literally a 2 material fly. So I'm gonna grab my bucktail, add a little bit of taper to it just by pulling some of the fibers out. And we're gonna clip this because I don't need to be working with all this extra stuff here. We'll keep our tail relatively short, I guess. So if you can just give me a minute, I'll find a couple measurements for you here. See if I can't find my ruler that's placed on here. Alright, so I gave that a couple good wraps. I'm just going to come in and trim it up again. Woo. Wow, you can see my scissors are not very friendly today. Actually, scratch that, they're never really friendly, but that's okay. So I'm just kind of pinching these guys, trying to keep them in check from flaring out all over the place on me. And wrapping them down. Make sure that these are not going anywhere. So one of the things that I realized when I first started working with bucktail is that it really likes to go and slide around if you don't secure it. Right, I can't tell you how many times I'd go through, finish a fly, oh man, this looks great, and just kind of pull out the fibers back here and it just falls into a bajillion pieces. Right, so you really want to make sure you secure your bucktail down nice and tight. Alright, so what I'm doing now, Surprise, surprise, another dubbing loop here. Actually, I want to make sure that our bucktail is relatively even on both sides. Kind of feel like a dork in my closer minnow video. I was like really stressing the, oh yep, you want to keep it on top here. Don't want it looking bad. And what do? I do the same thing I'm telling you guys not to do. So anyways, I lied. I'm gonna throw in a few half hitches down here. Put this guy in the cradle. And we're gonna come in with EP SE fibers. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna throw these guys in the dubbing loop. That's one of the things I've really enjoyed about this stuff. It's thick enough where you can get a good body out of it, but it's thin enough to throw it in a dubbing loop and it doesn't get all tangled and mess you up, or it doesn't give you a whole lot of problems in a dubbing loop. So it's really pretty versatile. So I'm just taking index finger length here, cutting it in half. Get these guys blended. If we want, just like in my last video with the plump buster, if you want, you can add ice dub if you're trying to do different colors, or you can just buy a different color SE fiber, I guess. That'd probably be a lot easier and wouldn't waste material. Anyways, so I'm going through now and I'm just trying to thin this loop out and stretch it out, because this is actually gonna go over most of the hook here. Right, this is our filler, if you will, on the body. And when we reverse tie bucktail up in front, it's gonna support that just a little bit. I guess the only difference between this and the one I shared on Instagram is today I want to add a hidden cone head, which will give it a little bit more weight. I'll get into the details of that a little bit later when we start talking about the spawn fly heads. I'll end up talking about that. So right, we're coming through with our bodkin, picking out all these trapped fibers down here, making sure that we're a-okay. If I could, I'd like to find my Velcro strap, but we're in the middle of a video. I should have done that beforehand. This goes to show, folks, planning's a good idea. Alrighty. So we got this guy twisted up. Half hitched our tying thread. Now we're gonna go through, this is more likely than not, these are gonna be open wraps. So right, not touching each other. Biggest thing to watch out for is just make sure you're not trapping any fibers. It's a pretty big pet peeve of mine, because it's just wasted material, in my opinion. Here we go. Yep, so you can see open spiral wraps will close it off at a nice flat angle just to give it a better look for the tie-in point. Tie-in point, I don't even know what I'm saying. Just for the tie-off point. My apologies. So, give that a couple more wraps and we'll tie this down. We're actually going to tie it all the way up front, relatively. And we'll reverse tie it again. Make sure our thread isn't going anywhere. Yeah, I'm sorry. In my head here, I'm sounding awful. Sound real congested, so I'm gonna apologize right now if the video is poor quality here, or if the audio anyway. So coming through with our bodkin again. Ow. Yeah, see, hooked myself. It's never fun. Making a nice solid base for our reverse bucktail. Then going through and finishing, pulling all this stuff out. Yeah, I'm probably one of the more ADD tires, I guess, here on YouTube. I cannot even think in a coherent fashion. Whether that means I actually have ADD or not is left to be unseen, because I do not know the answer. Alright, so you can see that gives it a really nice full body here. What we're going to do, I'm just going to trim this up just a little bit. Just to kind of give it a little bit of space for this bucktail to lie down just a little bit, right? Keeping in mind that we're going to want a nice taper for our front hook here, right? If you build up a whole bunch of bulk in the back hook, you're not going to have a whole lot of luck with the front hook. Alright, I'm just gonna try not to over trim that too much. That's looking pretty good, I think. Now we're gonna come in, more natural bucktail, and we are going to get our reverse tie going, which pretty much means that we're going to have two clumps, one on top, one on bottom here. We're going to start with one on top because that's where our hook's at right now. Going to grab a bit, right, as per always, clean these guys out. There we go. Then we got to find our length. So lengthwise, I'll say right about there is good. Trim these guys to length. And then what we're going to do, we're going to get a couple of loose wraps, right, just so it's got something to grip on. and just pull down and cinch that tight. All right, and you want to be mindful not to trap a whole bunch of fibers. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and actually build a little bit of a flat spot here for our thread base for when we flip this guy back. Okay, we've got the top half in. That looks pretty much, there we go. Now we're even. So I'm gonna come through. Go cut off another clump. Trim it out, or preen it out. We're not using scissors at the moment. Trying to get it to a similar hair base as these, or hair count, I guess, as these top ones. We'll call that good right there. Snip. So then one of the cool things about this back hook here, or not back hook, I apologize, I misspoke, the back, or tying in these bucktail like this, is you don't actually need to, or I prefer not to cut the ends of the bucktail all the way off, right? I like to give it just a little, if you can see that, this stuff right here, this tag end, what's going to end up happening when we reverse tie this is this stuff stands up a little bit, and that gives this bucktail somewhere to kind of rest, or make sure it just doesn't fall completely flat, right? And we've got the help of our SE fibers back here, but I like having the bucktail up there as well. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to work on actually reversing this. I'm coming through with the back of a mechanical pencil, just because that's what I have, and just moving some of the fibers away, pulling it back. Right, and then what I'm doing is I'm getting all these back like this. Trying to make sure they're tight. I don't want to really miss a whole bunch of fibers. Wow, that turned out a train wreck. Let's try that again, shall we? Slide all these back. Make sure we have a hold of all of them this time. There we go. Just like that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a couple of loose wraps and then cinch it down. As you can see what that does, there we go, is that small space, that thread gap we created in between the butt ends here and when the bucktail is out here, that acts as a spot for these top thread wraps to really seat down and get nice and tight. Also want to be careful, I don't want to cut any of my bucktail. Need to be careful when I'm pulling here. So, anyways, tie that off. Carefully cut that. And sorry for the background noise there. We're gonna Hit that with some head cement. So, this is the back end of our fly. If you'll give me just a minute, I'm going to make sure we're still recording here. Good deal. Having some trust issues with my phone recently. Anyways, you guys don't need to know about that. I'm going to pop this guy out. Coming in with another Arex Trout Predator size 4. If you guys want a little better keeling action, right, just make sure it runs perfectly straight up and down. I'd suggest moving to a hook with a wider gap, right, gap being the distance between the point and the shank. Right, I don't necessarily mean a longer hook, but a hook that's wider like this will help give you a better keeling action. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm already picking up the articulation wire. Start our thread. Cut it. Work it back. Alright. So I talked earlier, I hope, yikes, about tying on a budget. And this is where it's about to become very evident, right? This is a pretty thick articulation wire, from what I understand, mostly because I've never actually bought articulation wire. I'm reusing old pike leaders, right? Nylon coated steel. So I figured, hey, let's save a couple bucks, do something cool with it. In any case, that's our leader here, or my bad, articulation wire. I also forgot the bead. You can see I'm a little bit out of sorts. Also tying on a budget. I think these were probably Joanne Fabrics beads, right? These are by no means actual tying beads, but they do the job. So that's what we're using. Feel free to use your actual beads or articulation wire if you have it. By no means feel like you have to follow in my unorthodox footsteps. Anyways, tying this guy down. I'm just getting a couple wraps so I know it'll stay there while I come in with pliers and trim the edge short. And you know what I just realized now? I kind of lied about the cone head. That's my bad, guys. So if you're watching at home here, I can explain where you'd put the cone head, but I'm going to tie this one weightless now, because frankly I forgot. Right, so I'll go through and I'll explain where the cone head, that's what you don't want to do. Cut your thread on the articulation wire. Yeah, I'll explain where the cone head goes. Kind of while I'm going through this, when I get to that part. In essence, the cone head is going to replace the reverse tie back here for our stack of bucktail that's going up here. But we're not there yet. Where we are is another dubbing loop. two over the hook to around. You know, see, this is where gotta put on our thinking caps. We're gonna measure here. Okay. Alright, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie off right just like a 1/8 of an inch behind our articulation wire point, and that is where we're going to tie in our dubbing loop, which surprise surprise, it is more EPSE fibers. Wow, it's a mess. More SE fibers. This time just cut a little bit longer. Right, and keep in mind, for this one we don't need a whole lot of fibers because we're only doing a dubbing loop, just like a 1/2 an inch. Right, you don't need a whole lot of fibers to get the job done, but what we do want is we want longer fibers. So these longer fibers are going to sit back over the articulation bead and the bucktail. So, without talking too much, sorry, slide that in. Just lengthen this guy out just a little bit. We don't want any serious gaps or inconsistent spots, rather. I think that's probably the most important part, is the consistency. Because if you're looking at a fly, you can see, oh man, that's a bald spot. But you just want to make sure it's consistent, right? Because consistency is a lot neater in my opinion. Alright, so we're spinning this up. It looks like a disaster. That's okay, we'll fix it. Get the bodkin in there. Start pulling these guys out. Untrapping them. Make sure this is spun up real well. Oh boy. That's a snarl if I've ever seen one. There we go. We're gonna call that good. What we're gonna do, I always have a problem with this. I always put way too much space in between my actual loop and the hook. I'm gonna wet this down. Try and keep it from going all over the place on me. And we're gonna go in and get some that out of the way first of all. Get some open wraps. Pretty close open wraps though, mind you. We're not too worried. Just want to keep it close. We're gonna kind of do a couple of close wraps up front here, just to give it a little bit more density. Alrighty, that should be good. Grab our bobbin. Give this guy a couple of good wraps. And wrap it a couple times the other way. Clip. I'm just gonna pull everything back now that I have both hands. Do that. Make sure we're still recording. I'm kind of paranoid now. Then we're gonna pick this out Nothing too spectacular. And then we pull it all back. Don't hook yourself, that's not a good idea. So as you can see, that blends pretty nicely with our with the rest of our fly here. Bucktail's a little bit out of control, but in the water that'll tame up a little bit, right? So next step, more bucktail. So this bucktail is going to be a little bit longer, right, in order to keep our taper or body profile of the fly. We want to have this just a smidge longer. There we go. So we're gonna probably bring this back to about here, which means we'll trim like here. All right. I really wasn't kidding, guys, when I said this is a simple fly. Making a good base, because you know we're going to be, oh, that's not exactly right. If you find yourself in this position where the proportions aren't exactly correct, like I am, I'm going to back it off a couple just to relieve the tension a little bit. And you just use your thumb, just kind of spread that over, just like that. That's what we're looking for. Tighten that back down. Just a little bit of fiddling. Alright, let's flip it over. I'm going to do the same thing. My only word of caution with all this bucktail is that if you're working on a half-used bucktail like I am, every once in a while you'll accidentally clip a couple of grays, or not grays, sorry, that wasn't even close to correct. You'll clip a couple of brown hairs or the less than prime stuff, right? And when you're tying an all white fly, stuff like that tends to show up and be real noticeable. So just give it a quick look over. There we go. Just a quick look over when you're clipping and working on all that fun stuff. So I have wrapped this guy down. I'm going to throw in a double half hitch just because it won't hurt. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Phone cut out again. We're going to have to find a more permanent solution to that. But for now, right, what I've done is I've tied my bucktail back just like we did on the back hook. Nothing to worry about there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add on our final component, before the spawn fly head. And that's another loop of SE fiber. So we're going to cinch that down. I'm just going to not do that. Yikes. So we're going to tie this all the way up here, about the halfway point, if I remember correctly. Let's see what we're at. Yep, actually I do. Pop that in the bobbin cradle. And while we're getting our last stack of EP ready to go, this is the part where we'll start our first product review, and that is spawn fly fishing and their spawn fly heads. So my thoughts on them, I really enjoy them. They push a good amount of water around my fly. I got a chance to test these guys just a little while ago, and they did good. Right, my fly had a lot of movement. It was swimming phenomenally. Wow. The only caveat that I can think of at the moment is the fact that they're made of plastic, right? And when you think of plastic, you don't necessarily think of right, super heavy sinking material. So, right, this caveat wouldn't even really be a caveat if you're fishing like a sinking line or a sink tip line. Right, that's not going to be a problem for you at all. That's why adding a little bit of weight, if you're like me and you fish floating lines, like a hidden cone head, that's perfect, right? So you also may be thinking, oh man, it's plastic, what's the durability like? I found the durability to be pretty stellar for plastic. You know, I've pinched them in my fingers, tested them around. They've held up for me. So these guys they're working class, if you will, right? And one of the other things that I really like about these guys, not only is the customer service fantastic, right? I was talking to the CEO when I ordered these, going through the whole process. But they're super affordable, guys. Right? There are other companies out there that have a similar product. But right, as a student who's going into college, relatively low budget, I can't justify spending a whole bunch of money on these. But where Spawn really comes through is it gives me that high quality look for my fly, and it doesn't I can still go to college, you know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm selling my soul for a few of these flies. And the other thing that makes this great is, right, these make the fly look nice, but if you think about it, when you're spending $5 to $10 per on some of these other brands, right, that means every fly you tie becomes, here, actually, back that off just a couple. Every fly you tie becomes like a $15 or like at least a $10 fly. So when you lose a fly, that's a $10 mistake, right? And that's $10 you can't get back. And for Depends on where you guys are financially, but I can't be losing $5-10 a fly. So these guys at spawn, they come in more around $2 a fly. That drastically reduces the cost. Sorry, this is real sloppy. Drastically reduces the cost of a potential mistake. So, right, overview of these guys. Real strong, real inexpensive, customer service fantastic. Again, the only downside I can think of is they're just not as heavy as, say, like a Flyman fish skull. But that's not a big deal because there are other ways to work around that. And if you need a helmet on your fly, I highly suggest these guys. So sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. We're going through. We made our dubbing loop of EPSE fibers. Once again, 2 material fly. We're going to turn this right side up. That helped. We're going to pull all these guys back. Keep these fibers out of the way a little bit. Don't know how that happened. Somehow managed to reverse my tying thread. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going through, whip finish this guy off for one thing. Clip. Now here's the fun part. Moment of truth when you're trying to decide if this guy fits or not. And look at that. It's gonna fit. Good deal. So, go over to our friend Mr. Superglue. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this guy. This is the silver lining from Spawn, by the way. Go through and just get a little bit on the inside there. You guys probably can't see that. I apologize. Just get a little bit on the inside there. We're going to carefully smush this back. Make sure it's straight up and down. Make sure we've got an eye that we can work with. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some just scrap materials on my desk here. Use the rest of the dubbing loop I didn't use. We're going to kind of clean most of that extra super glue off. Make sure we can get a hook through there. And then that's pretty much done. Only difference now, you can see this is pretty darn bulky at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through with some scissors, if I can find the pair that I'm trying to use. Golly. Where did I put those? Anyways, get that pair of scissors. We're just going to go through, just kind of thin this down just a little bit. Just so we're not carrying a whole bunch of extra material. We're going to cut that kind of a taper so it kind of blends with the materials at the end there. Bucktail. And once you've done that, you are just about set. Thank you all for watching.